The warning alarm screamed across the Empire's biggest space station. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Commander Yuki stared at her screen in complete shock. A massive ship had just appeared out of nowhere at the edge of their territory. But that was impossible. Every ship in the galaxy used hyperspace travel, and hyperspace always left a signature. Always. It was like a fingerprint that their sensors could detect from millions of miles away. "Run the scan again," she ordered her. "Team." There has to be a mistake. But the results came back the same. No hyperspace signature, no matching energy patterns in their database. Nothing that made any sense at all. Admiral Kyle received the emergency report within minutes. His face went pale as he read the details. In his 40 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. The Empire had records of every single ship, every technology, every civilization in the galaxy. They had to. It was how they maintained control over thousands of worlds. "Dispatch the 3rd, 7th, and 9th battle fleets immediately," he commanded. "Full combat readiness. 3 entire fleets." That was enough firepower to destroy a small planet. But Kyle wasn't taking any chances with an unknown vessel this large. As the Imperial ships approached, they tried to establish communication. The response they got made everyone freeze. The voice that came through their speakers was speaking in a language that sounded ancient, really ancient, like something from the old historical archives that only scholars bothered to study anymore. But somehow their translation systems managed to make sense of it. "This is the colony ship Soul's Dawn, representing the survivors of Earth." Captain Minho speaking. "Earth?" The Imperial officers looked at each other in confusion. There was no planet called Earth in any of their star charts. They controlled over 10,000 worlds, and not one of them was called Earth. Captain Minho's voice continued, calm but firm. "We are peaceful travelers seeking a new home. Our navigator Gina has confirmed we have entered your space unintentionally." Admiral Kale studied the readings his ships were sending back. The vessel was huge, maybe 3 times larger than his. Biggest battleship. But the technology readings were bizarre. Their sensors showed energy systems that looked incredibly primitive, like something from thousands of years ago. "How is this possible?" whispered Lieutenant Juan, staring at the data. "Their fusion reactors are so basic, they shouldn't even be able to leave their home system. But somehow they're here, in deep space, light years from anywhere." The mystery got deeper when they analyzed the ship's construction. Everything about it screamed ancient technology, chemical propulsion systems that belonged in a museum, computer systems that were laughably outdated. Even their communication equipment was primitive. Yet somehow this ancient ship had appeared in their territory without any warning, without using hyperspace, without showing up on any of their long-range sensors until it was right there. "Navigator." Gina's voice joined the conversation, speaking with a strange accent that made the translation software work harder than usual. "We've been traveling for a very long time. Our home was destroyed. We're just looking for somewhere safe to start." "Hova." The words sent a chill through every Imperial officer listening. Her destroyed homeworld. Survivors traveling in an ancient ship. It sounded like something from the old war stories their grandparents used to tell. But those were just stories, weren't they? Dr. Vera had been working for 18 straight hours, and her eyes were burning. She had searched through every single database the Empire had, every planet registry, every species catalog, every historical record going back 10,000 years. The result was always the same. Nothing, absolutely nothing about Earth or humans. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, rubbing her temples. "We have records of tiny asteroid colonies with 50 people. We have files on extinct civilizations that died out 8,000 years ago. How can we have zero information about an entire planet and species?" Her assistant, Jin, brought her another cup of coffee. Maybe they're lying? Maybe they made up the name? But Dr. Vera shook her head. The biological samples the humans had transmitted were real, very real and very disturbing. She pulled up the genetic analysis on her main screen. The DNA patterns were unlike anything in their current databases, but there was something familiar about them, something that made her stomach twist with unease. Computer cross-referenced these genetic markers with extinct species archives. The results made her drop her coffee cup. Matches, dozens of them. The humans shared genetic similarities with species from all across the galaxy, species that had been wiped out during something the old records called the Great Purge. Her hands were shaking as she called Chief Archivist Sora. "You need to get down here right now and bring the restricted historical files." Sora arrived within minutes carrying a secure data pad that required 3 different authorization codes to open. Her face was grim. "I've been doing some digging of my own. There are gaps in our historical records. Big gaps." "What kind of gaps?" "The kind that someone deliberately created." Sora's voice was barely above a whisper. "Entire sections of our early expansion history have been deleted or classified so heavily that even I can barely access them." Dr. Vera showed her the genetic analysis. "These humans aren't just random aliens. They're connected to dozens of species that supposedly went extinct during our early expansion period, species that were completely wiped out." Sora's face went pale. The Great Purge wasn't just a military campaign, it was genocide. Complete extermination of any species that might challenge imperial expansion. They both stared at the screen in horror. The implications were terrifying. "If these humans are telling the truth about Earth being destroyed," Dr. Vera said slowly, "then we destroyed it. The Empire destroyed their homeworld." "But the records show complete elimination," Sora protested. "No survivors. That was the whole point of the Purge protocols." "Then how are they here?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. If humans had survived the Empire's attempted genocide, what did that mean? How many other species might have escaped? How many other refugee ships might be out there carrying survivors of imperial extermination campaigns? Dr. Vera pulled up star charts from 12,000 years ago. The coordinates the humans had mentioned for Earth matched a system that imperial records listed as successfully pacified and sterilized. "They're ghosts," she whispered. "Living ghosts of our worst crimes." Sora was already reaching for her. "Communicator. We have to tell Admiral Kale immediately." "Tell him what? That we found survivors of a genocide we're not supposed to know about? That our entire galactic expansion was built on systematic extermination?" He needs to know what we're dealing with. But Dr. Vera was thinking about something else entirely, something that made her blood run cold. "Sora, if one colony ship survived, how many others might be out there? How many other human ships might have escaped Earth before we destroyed it?" The answer to that question would determine whether this was just a curious historical discovery or the beginning of the Empire's worst nightmare. Chief Engineer Taro stared at the technical readouts and started laughing. Not because anything was funny, but because his brain couldn't process what he was seeing any other way. "Sir, you need to look at this," his assistant Kenji said, pointing at the screen. "Their fusion reactors are so basic, my grandfather could have built them. And their computer systems? They're running on technology that's literally ancient." Taro studied the schematics the humans had transmitted. Everything about their ship looked like it belonged in a history museum. Chemical rockets for maneuvering. Primitive fusion drives that barely produced enough power to run a small space station. Computer processors that were slower than a child's toy. "How is this possible?" he muttered. "According to these specs, their ship shouldn't even be able to reach the next star system. It would take them hundreds of years just to travel between nearby planets. But the Soul's dawn was here. Somehow this ancient piece of technology had crossed distances that would challenge even the Empire's most advanced vessels." Lieutenant Yuna pulled up the navigation data. "Sir, according to their flight path, they've traveled over 40,000 light years. Our fastest ships would need at least 30 years to cover that distance." 30 years? Try 50, Taro corrected. "And that's with our best hyperspace technology. These humans don't even have hyperspace drives." The mystery deepened when Captain Minho agreed to a direct communication link. His image appeared on their main screen, and Taro was surprised to see how young he looked. Too young to have commanded a ship for the kind of journey their data suggested. "Captain, our engineers are having trouble understanding your technology." Taro began carefully. "Your ship appears to have traveled impossible distances using very basic propulsion systems." Minho smiled sadly. "We didn't have a choice. When Earth was attacked, we had to use what we had. Our journey took 12,000 years. 12,000 years. The number hit Taro like a physical blow. "That's impossible." No crew could survive that long. No ship could function for that duration. We used cryogenic sleep, Minho explained. Our entire population was frozen for the journey. Only essential systems remained active, running on automated protocols. Engineer Hana's voice joined the conversation. She was a woman who looked to be in her 30s with tired eyes that seemed much older. We learned to build for the long term. Every system had to work perfectly for thousands of years with minimal maintenance. Taro's mind was reeling. The Empire's ships required constant maintenance and crew attention. The idea of a vessel running automatically for 12 millennia was beyond their capabilities. "How many people are on your ship?" Yuna asked. 50,000, Hana replied. "All in cryogenic storage until we found a suitable world. We were one of 17 colony ships that launched during the Exodus." 17. Taro felt the room start spinning. 17 ships, all like yours, each carrying different groups of survivors, Minho confirmed. Scientists, engineers, farmers, doctors. We divided our population among the ships and sent them in different directions. It was our only hope of survival. Kenji was frantically calculating on his computer. "Sir, if each ship carried 50,000 people, that's almost 1,000,000 human survivors, scattered across the galaxy." But Taro was thinking about something even more disturbing. If these humans could build ships that functioned perfectly for 12,000 years using primitive technology, what could they accomplish with modern resources? "Captain Minho," he said slowly, "what happens now that you've found us?" The human's expression grew serious. "Now we wake up our people and find out what happened to our home, and we start looking for our 17 scattered families." The first thing Minji noticed when she woke up was the cold. Bone-deep, aching. Cold that seemed to come from inside her body. Her muscles felt like they hadn't moved in years, which she realized with growing horror was probably true. "Easy, take your time," a gentle voice said. Medical Chief Yuna was standing beside her cryogenic pod, checking readings on a tablet. "You've been asleep for a very long time." Minji tried to speak, but only a croak came out. Yuna handed her a cup of warm liquid that tasted like honey and medicine. "How long?" Minji finally managed to ask. Yuna's expression grew sad. 12,000 years. All around the massive awakening bay, similar scenes were playing out. Thousands of cryogenic pods were opening with soft hisses of escaping gas. People were sitting up slowly, confused and disoriented, as medical teams helped them adjust to being alive again. Captain Minho's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "Citizens of New Busan Colony, this is your captain. I know. You're confused and scared. Please remain calm while our medical teams assist you. We will have a full briefing in the main assembly hall once everyone is stable." Dai woke up 3 pods over from Minji. He had been a construction engineer back on Earth, volunteering for the colony mission to help build their new world. Now he looked around at faces he hadn't seen in over 10 millennia. "Did we make it?" he asked weakly. "Did we find a new home?" The medical assistant helping him hesitated. "Captain Minho will explain everything soon." But it was Communications Officer Junho who delivered the news that changed everything. He had been monitoring transmissions from the Imperial ships, using their translation software to understand what these aliens were saying about Earth. He found Captain Minho in the command center, staring out at the Imperial fleet surrounding them. "Captain, I've been listening to their communications," Junho said quietly. "Earth is gone, completely destroyed, and according to their records, it happened shortly after we launched." Minho closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He had hoped, during all those centuries of automated flight, that somehow Earth had survived, that maybe the attack had been repelled, that their sacrifice in leaving home hadn't been necessary. "How shortly after?" he asked. "Maybe a few years, a decade at most." Junho's voice was barely audible. "Everyone we left behind is dead. Everyone who chose to stay and fight." The weight of that knowledge settled on Minho's shoulders like a crushing burden. 50,000. People were waking up right now, expecting to hear about their new home. Instead, he would have to tell them they were the only humans left alive in the universe. In the medical bay, Dr. Yuna was dealing with the same terrible realization. As colonists asked about messages from home, about news from Earth, she had to find gentle ways to prepare them for the truth. "Doctor," asked Hyan, a teacher who had volunteered to help educate the colony's children, "when can we send word back to Earth? My family will want to know we arrived safely." Yuna knelt beside the woman's pod. "Hyun, there's something we need to discuss. Earth isn't there anymore." The assembly hall had never held 50,000 people before, but somehow they all fit. Families huddled together, friends found each other after 12 millennia of separation, and children who had been frozen at age 5 were now waking up in a completely different universe. Captain Minho stood at the front, looking out at faces filled with hope and expectation. He knew that in the next few minutes he would destroy that hope forever. "My fellow humans," he began, his voice steady despite the pain in his heart. "We are no longer refugees seeking a new home. We are the last survivors of our entire species." Historian. Thane had always loved digging through old records. Most people found ancient imperial archives boring, but he lived for the thrill of discovering forgotten pieces of history. Today, however, he wished he had never started looking. The classified. Files required 7 different security clearances to access. Even with his high-level position, it took him 3 hours to get permission to view the Terror Campaign documents. What he found inside made his hands shake. Operation Final Solution, Terror System Pacification, read the first document. It was dated 12,047 years ago, during the Empire's early expansion period. The language was cold and clinical, but the meaning was crystal clear. Total extermination. No survivors. Complete sterilization of the planet's surface. Thane scrolled through page after page of horrifying details. Battle reports describing orbital bombardment that lasted for weeks. Casualty estimates that climbed higher and higher. And finally, the official conclusion. Terror campaign completed successfully. 99.7% elimination rate achieved. But it was that tiny percentage that made Thane's blood run cold. 99.7% meant that some humans had escaped. He found Security Chief Dara in her office reviewing files about the mysterious Soul's Dawn. She looked up when he entered and immediately noticed his pale complexion. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "I have," Thane replied, handing her the classified documents. "Several million of them." Dara read through the files in stunned silence. As head of Imperial Security, she had access to information most people never saw. But even she had never heard of the Terror Campaign. "This is impossible," she whispered. "The Empire doesn't conduct genocide. We're civilized. We offer membership to conquered species." Thane pulled up more documents. Not back then, in the early Gi days, the Empire had a different policy. Any species that showed signs of rapid technological development was considered a threat. They were eliminated completely. The records painted a picture of systematic horror, not just Earth but dozens of other worlds. Entire civilizations wiped out because they might someday challenge Imperial dominance. "Look at this," Thane pointed, to a specific report. They detected 17 large vessels leaving Earth's orbit during the final bombardment. The Imperial fleet was ordered to pursue and destroy them. Dara studied the pursuit records. They caught and destroyed 14 ships, but 3 escaped into deep space. 3 ships carrying approximately 150,000 human survivors, Thane added. And according to these files, the Empire spent the next 3 centuries hunting them down. The final reports claimed all remaining human vessels had been found and destroyed. Case closed, species extinct, files sealed and forgotten. Except now the Soul's Dawn was sitting right outside their space station, carrying 50,000 very alive humans. "They failed," Dara said quietly. "The Empire failed to complete the genocide." Thane nodded grimly. "And if the Soul's Dawn survived, what about the other ships? The records show 17 vessels launched from Earth. They only definitively destroyed 14. The implications hit Dara like a physical blow. 3 ships are unaccounted for. 3 ships that could have been carrying survivors for over 12,000 years. But there was something even worse in the files. Something that made both of them sick to their stomachs. The Terror Campaign wasn't unique. The classified archives contained dozens of similar operations, hundreds of species that had been completely eliminated during the Empire's expansion. Entire. Star systems sterilized and their histories erased. How many other survivors might be out there? Thane wondered aloud. How many other refugee ships carrying the last remnants of extinct civilizations? Dara was already thinking about the political implications. If word got out that the Empire was built on systematic genocide, it would destroy their authority across the galaxy. Their subject species would revolt. Their allies would abandon them. "We have to contain this," she said. "No one else can know what we've discovered." But as they spoke, Captain Minho was broadcasting on all galactic frequencies, telling his story, to anyone who would listen. The story of Earth's destruction, the story of humanity's survival, the story of imperial genocide. The ghosts of the Empire's past were no longer silent. They were very much alive, and they were telling the galaxy exactly what the Empire had done to them. Admiral Kale expected the boarding operation to take maybe 30 minutes. Standard Imperial protocol was simple: board the vessel, process the occupants, and integrate any useful technology into the Empire. He had done this thousands of times with other species, but humans, as he was about to learn, were not like other species. The first Imperial boarding pod attached to the Soul's Dawn's hull with a metallic clang. 20 elite soldiers prepared to cut through the airlock, expecting to find confused civilians who would surrender immediately when faced with superior Imperial technology. Instead, they found Tai waiting for them. Tai had been a farmer back on Earth, specializing in automated crop systems. When the boarding alarm sounded, he didn't panic. He did what humans always do when facing a problem. He improvised. The agricultural bay was full of equipment designed to plant, tend, and harvest crops for 50,000 people. Tai looked at the soil processors, the automated planters, and the harvest drones and saw something completely different. "Minho, they're cutting through the outer hull," he called into his communicator. "Give me 2 minutes." Working with desperate efficiency, Tai rewired the soil processors to shoot high-pressure streams of metal fragments. He reprogrammed the planting drones to swarm any unauthorized personnel. The harvest equipment, designed to cut through tough plant stalks, suddenly became something much more dangerous. When the Imperial soldiers finally breached the airlock, they walked into a nightmare. The primitive farming equipment attacked them with coordinated precision. Soil processors fired metal projectiles that punched through their armor. Swarms of small drones harassed them from every angle. What should have been an easy capture became a desperate fighting retreat. Meanwhile, Engineer Hana was having the time of her life in the ship's engineering section. The Imperial boarding pods had attached to the hull using magnetic clamps and energy couplers, standard technology that was supposed to be impossible to counter. Hana studied the Imperial devices for exactly 3 minutes before she started laughing. "You guys are not very creative," she muttered, connecting her tablet to the boarding pod's systems. Within minutes, she had not only disabled their attachment mechanisms, but had also downloaded their entire technical database. "Minho, I've got their schematics," she announced over the ship's communication system. "Their energy shields, their weapons, even their computer systems. This is like Christmas morning." But it was pilot Nari who really shocked the Imperial forces. As a child on Earth, she had dreamed of flying among the stars. Now faced with 3 Imperial battle fleets, she saw the ultimate flying challenge. The Soul's Dawn wasn't built for combat, but Nari realized it didn't need to be. The ship was massive, with redundant systems and incredibly sturdy construction. All she needed to do was think differently about how to use it. "Hana, can you reroute power from the agricultural systems to the engines?" she asked. "Already on it. You've got full power in 30 seconds. What happened next became legendary in Imperial military circles. The primitive human ship suddenly accelerated at impossible speeds, using its own massive bulk as a weapon. Imperial fighters that got too close were simply rammed aside. Boarding pods were scraped off the hull like barnacles. The Soul's Dawn spun and twisted through space in ways that should have been impossible for a ship its size. Nari was flying it like a fighter craft, using maneuvers that made seasoned Imperial pilots sick just watching. "How is she doing that?" demanded Admiral Kale, watching his carefully planned operation fall apart. His tactical officer could only stare in amazement. "Sir, she's using our own gravitational fields against us. Every time we try to get close, she uses our ship's gravity to slingshot away. The worst part wasn't the military failure. It was the realization that the humans weren't just defending themselves. They were learning. Every Imperial tactic they encountered was quickly understood, adapted to, and countered. Within 6 hours, what should have been a simple boarding operation had cost the Empire 12 boarding pods, 43 fighters, and the respect of their entire fleet. The humans hadn't just survived. They had won. Their communications specialist Bin had never expected to become the voice of galactic revolution. She was just trying to send a simple message explaining who they were and where they came from. But her broadcast from the Soul's Dawn would change everything. "This is the human colony ship, Soul's Dawn to all listening civilizations." She spoke clearly into the transmitter. "We are the survivors of Earth, which was destroyed by the Galactic Empire 12,000 years ago. We were told our species was extinct. We were told resistance was impossible. We were told wrong." The message went out on all frequencies, bouncing off communication relays across the galaxy. Within hours, it reached worlds that hadn't heard from each other in centuries. On the mining planet Kepler-7, a group of enslaved Zeltarians working in the deep tunnels heard the broadcast on their hidden radio. For generations, they had been told their homeworld was peacefully integrated into the Empire. Now they learned the truth. Their ancestors had been conquered, their culture destroyed, their people scattered. But if humans could survive total annihilation, maybe the Zeltarians weren't as powerless as they thought. The rebellion started small. A few mining tunnels going accidentally off course, some equipment mysteriously breaking down, Imperial overseers finding their air recyclers clogged with strange debris. On the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, the Melaran farmers had been forced to grow food for Imperial worlds while their own people went hungry. They listened to Bin's broadcast while working in the fields, and something changed in their hearts. The first act of rebellion was simple. They started keeping more food for themselves. When Imperial collectors came to gather the harvest, they found the storage silos strangely empty. Tactical Officer Ray monitored these developments from the Soul's Dawn's communication center. Her job back on Earth had been coordinating emergency services during natural disasters. Now she found herself coordinating something much bigger. "Bin, we're getting messages from 12 different star systems," she reported. "They want to know if our offer of alliance is real." What offer of alliance? They hadn't made any such offer. But Ray quickly realized that desperate people were hearing hope in their message, even when none was explicitly promised. "What do we tell them?" Bin asked. Captain Minho made the decision that would define humanity's role in galactic history. "We tell them the truth. We're not conquerors. We're not looking to rule anyone. But we're also not going to hide while other species suffer what we suffered." The symbol of the Soul's Dawn began appearing on walls across Imperial space. Sometimes it was scratched into metal with improvised tools. Sometimes it was painted with whatever materials people could find. Always it carried the same message: survival is possible. On the industrial world of Factory Station 9, the robotic workers had been modified so extensively that most species considered them barely alive. But they still remembered their original forms, still dreamed of the green world they came from before being converted into living machines. When they heard about humans surviving extinction, something awakened in their mechanical hearts. The first sign of rebellion was subtle. Production quotas mysteriously failing to meet targets. Imperial engineers couldn't figure out why perfectly functional robots were working slower. But Ray understood. She had been coordinating with resistance cells for weeks now, using encrypted channels hidden within normal Imperial communications. "The mechanoids of Factory Station 9 want to know if we have any technical specifications for removing their control implants," she told Engineer Hannah. Hannah smiled grimly. "Tell them I'll have instructions ready within the hour." The Empire's greatest fear was becoming reality. For 10,000 years, they had maintained control through a simple lie. Resistance was futile. Species that opposed them were completely destroyed, with no survivors to inspire others. But the Soul's Dawn proved that lie false. If humans could survive, if they could fight back, if they could turn their primitive technology into effective weapons, then maybe other species could too. The awakening wasn't just political, it was personal. Across the galaxy, individuals who had accepted their fate as conquered peoples began to remember what it felt like to be free. Captain Minho stood before the main communication array, holding a data pad that contained humanity's greatest secret. For 12,000 years, he had hoped this moment would never come. Now it was their only choice. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began, his voice broadcasting across every communication channel they could access. "I am Captain Minho of the colony. Ship Soul's Dawn. What I'm about to share will change everything you know about human survival." He paused, looking at the coordinates displayed on his screen. 16 sets of numbers that represented 16 different worlds, 16 different groups of human survivors scattered across the galaxy. When Earth fell, we didn't send just one ship into the darkness. We sent 17. The impact of those words hit the Imperial Command Center like a physical blow. Admiral Kale sat down heavily, staring at the incoming transmission in disbelief. 17 ships, Minho continued, each carrying 50,000 survivors, each heading to a different part of the galaxy, each carrying a piece of humanity's soul. As Minho read out the coordinates, Intelligence Officer Kai was frantically cross-referencing them with Imperial star charts. What she found made her hands shake. "Admiral," she called out, her voice cracking, "these coordinates, they match unexplained phenomena we've been tracking for centuries. Strange energy signatures, unidentified structures, missing Imperial scout ships." Scout Commander Vale pulled up his reports from deep space reconnaissance missions. For years, his teams had encountered bizarre situations in remote star systems. Ships that vanished without explanation, space stations that appeared overnight, technologies that didn't match any known civilization. "Sir, the Kepler 442 system," he said, pointing to one of Minho's coordinates. "We lost 3 scout ships there over the past century. Each time the crews reported encountering impossible defensive systems before their transmissions cut out." "And here," Kai added, highlighting another coordinate, "the Gliese 667 region. Our industrial surveys keep getting sabotaged by what we thought were equipment failures. But look at this pattern. The sabotage incidents formed a clear defensive perimeter around one specific star system. A star system that exactly matched one of Minho's coordinates. As the hours passed, the true scope of humanity's survival became clear. Each coordinate represented not just a colony, but an entire civilization that had spent 12,000 years developing in isolation. The Proxima Centauri colony specialized in defensive technology, Minho explained in his broadcast. They turned their entire star system into a fortress that could withstand any attack. Vale remembered the reports from that region. Imperial fleets approaching the system would experience mysterious malfunctions. Ships would find their weapon systems disabled, their navigation scrambled, their life support failing. The few vessels that returned reported encountering defensive measures that seemed to appear from nowhere. The Trappist-1 colony focused on mobility, Minho continued. They built ships that could move faster and hide better than anything in the galaxy. That explained the phantom sightings, Kai realized. For centuries, Imperial sensors had detected massive vessels at the edge of their territory. But every time they investigated, the ships would vanish, as if they had never existed. The Wolf 359 colony became master engineers, Minho said. They learned to build with resources others thought useless. Scout reports from the Wolf region described finding massive structures that appeared to be constructed from asteroid debris and space dust. Imperial engineers had dismissed these reports as impossible. No one could build functional habitats from such materials, but humans could. Humans always found a way. The most terrifying revelation came when Minho described the Kepler 186 colony. They became strategists and planners. For 12,000 years they've been watching the galaxy, learning about every species, every conflict, every weakness. Intelligence Officer Kai went pale. If one human colony had been observing galactic politics for 12 millennia, they would know things about the Empire that the Empire didn't know about itself. Each colony developed differently, Minho concluded. But we all kept one thing unchanged. We never forgot what happened to Earth, and we never stopped believing that someday we would find each other again. Admiral Kyle realized with growing horror that the Empire hadn't just missed one refugee ship. They had missed an entire network of human civilizations, each one uniquely adapted to survive and fight. The humans weren't just survivors, they were an entire species that had spent 12,000 years preparing for this moment. The first Imperial fleet to reach a human colony location was the 7th Battle Group commanded by Admiral Ura. She expected to find a small settlement of primitive survivors, maybe a few thousand people living on a barely habitable world. Instead, she found the Kepler 442 system completely transformed. "Admiral," her sensor officer reported, voice filled with disbelief, "the entire asteroid belt has been weaponized. Every single rock is broadcasting targeting signals. What had once been empty space was now a deadly maze of automated defenses." The humans of Kepler 442 had spent 12,000 years turning their star system into an impregnable fortress, not with massive battleships or planet-destroying weapons, but with millions of small, clever traps. "How is this possible?" Admiral Ura demanded as her ship struggled to navigate through the defensive grid. The answer came from the human settlement itself, a voice speaking perfect Imperial standard, but with an accent that hadn't been heard in millennia. "Welcome to New Sparta," the voice said calmly. "We've been expecting you for about 12,000 years." Meanwhile, the 5th Fleet had reached the TRAPPIST-1 system, only to find it apparently empty. Commander Sato ordered a full sensor sweep, but the results made no sense. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures, but we can't locate their source," his science officer reported. "It's like there are invisible cities out there." Suddenly, the empty space around them came alive. Massive human ships decloaked simultaneously, surrounding the Imperial fleet. But these weren't like the Soul's Dawn. These vessels were sleek, fast and completely undetectable, until they chose to reveal themselves. 12,000 years is a long time to perfect stealth technology, came the transmission from the lead human ship, especially when you're motivated by survival. But it was the 3rd Fleet's discovery at Wolf 359 that truly terrified Imperial Command. They found humans who had learned to build entire civilizations from space debris. Massive ring-shaped habitats, constructed from asteroid fragments and powered by salvaged materials. "They're not just surviving," reported Fleet Captain Nori. "They're thriving. These habitats house millions of people, and they're completely self-sufficient." The humans of Wolf 359 had become master recyclers and engineers. They could take any broken piece of technology and turn it into something useful. When Imperial ships tried to attack their habitats, they found their own damaged vessels being instantly salvaged and turned into defensive systems. Back on the Soul's Dawn, Captain Minho was coordinating with his scattered brothers and sisters across the galaxy. Communication networks that had been silent for 12 millennia suddenly came alive with human voices. "This is New Athens Colony reporting in," came one transmission. "We have 17 million citizens and complete archives of human knowledge. New." "Beijing here," said another. "We've been tracking Imperial movement patterns for the past 3,000 years. We know their weaknesses." "New Lagos calling," a third voice added. "Our shipyards can produce vessels faster than the Empire can destroy them." Each human colony had evolved to meet different challenges, but all had retained the same core human trait: the absolute refusal to give up. The Empire realized their worst nightmare was coming true. They weren't facing one group of survivors. They were facing an entire species that had spent 12,000 years preparing for this moment. Admiral Kyle sat in his command center, watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. Human colonies, revealing themselves. Rebel uprisings on Imperial worlds. Subject species demanding freedom. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "the Galactic Council is requesting an emergency session. They want to discuss the human situation." Kyle laughed bitterly. "The human situation? It's as if 50 million scattered humans could threaten an empire that controlled thousands of worlds." But deep down, he knew the truth. The Empire's power had always been based on fear. Fear that resistance was impossible. Fear that total defeat meant total extinction. The humans had proven both fears wrong. They had survived extinction. They had turned survival into victory. And now they were teaching the entire galaxy that the Empire could be defeated. For the first time in 10,000, Years the mighty Galactic Empire was afraid, and across the stars humanity's children were coming home.